Brothers, welcome back for another episode of The Gentleman's Journey. We're so glad to have you here once again from the 180th Convention at the Marriott Town Center. Today, I'm very pleased to have our guest speaker here with me, Alpha Sigma, class of 90, Ali Farahnakian. Ali, thank you so much for being with us today. I really do appreciate you sitting down with me. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Did you have an okay trip in?
Yeah, I flew in from New York City this morning, a par 3. My place to LaGuardia to RDU, and then Don Beeson was kind enough to pick me up at RDU.
That is kind of him indeed. So one thing I've started off with, just with convention and all this going on, is every time I've sat someone down, I've just asked them, what does convention mean to you? Some people haven't been to one before. I know this is my first one, let alone as a delegate. Many people have been to a lot, but a lot of people have various things to say about how it goes, the experience they have with it. What is convention to you?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, we were maybe at the 150th. Claude Macklin and I from Carolina, we drove up there to be a part of it. And I think it's a nice way for everybody to gather from around the country who are Chi-Psis to kind of do some planning and kind of collaborating on how to take what Chi-Psi is at the individual universities and make it something that can be greater than the sum of its parts.
I think just coming here and seeing that there's probably going to be no greater place where you can meet so many people from so many different alphas, undergraduate and alumni alike. I think that's so unique. And I think, again, some things that you'll speak on tonight and just include like how special it is that we're here, how special it is that we've been able to go through this undergrad experience and continue to be involved as alumni. So moving into early life, you grew up in North Carolina, right? Born in Iran, but you did grow up in North Carolina. Tell me about your early life. What did you like? What were you into? And what ultimately led you to Chapel Hill?
Well, yeah, I grew up in Connecticut, and then as a third grader, we moved to North Carolina, a small town called Danbury, North Carolina, population about 150. And that's where I really started playing make-believe, running around the woods, playing Army, riding motorcycles, chasing Sasquatch, riding our bikes. And I was there 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and it was kind of an idyllic place for a young kid because you got to leave the house in the morning and you probably had a 5-mile radius that you could just go on your bicycle or motorcycle and just explore. Little league there. And then as a 6th grader, I moved to a place right outside of Winston-Salem, Clemens, North Carolina, Bermuda Run. I was there from 6th grade on. My folks still live there. So that's, again, I don't really believe in free will. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in clues. So, you don't choose, the time in history you were born. You don't choose your parents. So I had no real say as a 9-month-old coming to America in the summer of '69.
Sure.
Or my father taking a job as a country doctor in North Carolina, which is everything that led to me going to Chapel Hill, which wasn't my first choice because the small country day that I went to at that time in '85, Carolina was kind of a fallback school. That seems absurd now.
It does.
But back then, there were other schools that I wanted to go to that were out of state. But my mom asked me to apply 3 days after the application was due because back then it was just 1 page, no essay, just your grades, SATs, and fill out your activities. Sure. I got in, and then ultimately it seemed to be the best decision for me at the time. And, I got lucky to go to a very good school.
I think it's amazing, like the rigor that's associated with just applying now, and how much that's changed. There's people in here that are in-state, and they take a considerable amount of in-state people that have trouble applying, getting in. People say applying is more difficult than actually going to the school these days. So I definitely think that's super interesting. And one question we like to anchor to with all of our guests is, what specifically made you want to join a fraternity? And moreover, what led you specifically to Chi-Psi?
Well, ultimately, when I went to Carolina, I didn't want to join a fraternity. I wanted to be a GDI and, just kind of be a lone wolf and do my thing at Carolina. But after my freshman year, the lodge at Carolina was allowing folks to live there. And one of my suite mates at Avery Dorm said, my girlfriend is staying at this place called the Chi-Psi Lodge. They rent rooms. I said, all right. I looked into it, and for like $225, you could rent a room for each summer session. And that was the best deal you could get because you got breakfast and dinner as well. So for me, it was a housing thing for the summer. And then all of a sudden I met these guys that were incredible guys. And I was like, I would have been friends with these guys whether they were in a fraternity or not. So, guys like Steve Ducey, Mike Egwis, Mike Mezzi, Dan Goldstein, Fred Weller, James Beeler, who, we're still friends to this day. We keep a text exchange going. So I really I didn't have a desire to be in a fraternity, but when I met these guys, I felt like this seems like a cool thing.
Sure. And as you know, your Alpha in particular, Alpha Sigma, has a notoriously beautiful lodge. And as you know, the lodge, of course, is not just a building. Talk to me about what the lodge meant to you then and still means to you and the rest of our brotherhood today. What is that in your eyes?
Well, I think, it is a beautiful space, especially the lodge at Chapel Hill. Being one of the highest points in Chapel Hill, the amount of land they have, the building, the resources. I was in Chapel Hill doing a comedy theater project since 2017 to 2021, and I had my 50th birthday in Chapel Hill. And when I had it there, over 75 fraternity brothers showed up 3 decades later. Now, Chapel Hill does a lot of the heavy lifting because they're coming back to their college town, and they're coming back for each other, and they just need a reason to. So I think that's really, to me, what the value of the lodge is that, 30 years later, 75 people will come from around the world to be with each other for just a weekend.
I think it's just amazing that, and unique, that a fraternal organization like ours values what seems just like brick and mortar to others, right? To the outside eye, values it so highly, really dives deep into the meaning of what it is. For example, me being from Phi Delta, who we just recently acquired a lodge. Before that, obviously it's nothingness, and you're realizing that the lodge is not a physical space. It's the people that make it what it is. We've spoken to plenty of other people who experienced a similar feat, or were in a building that would be regarded by the typical eye as garbage, rubbish, trash, whatever you want to call it. And just the fact that people still appreciate it so much for what it is, I really think it sets us apart as an organization, and I think you know that as well. So moving kind of towards the end of your undergrad experience, you moved to Chicago following college. Tell me about why you moved there, what that was like, and what you sought to do in Chi-Town.
Well, I was graduating. I was a fifth-year senior, primarily because I met a bunch of guys who were going to stay a fifth year. Carolina's amazing. The lodge was an amazing time there, and we all kind of one day in the either the Alpha room or the TV lounge kind of were decided. I think someone was like, I think I'm going to stay a fifth year. And then we were all like, yeah, let's stay a fifth year. And I was young going to Carolina, so it didn't seem like that big a deal to stay an extra year. Friends were staying. Carolina also encouraged fifth-year seniors at the time. It was Christmas Eve of '89, and I was watching Saturday Night Live, and I had legitimately what I consider an epiphany, where while watching it, I thought to myself, I want to write for this show at some point in my life. After Christmas, I went back to the lodge in January of 1990, and I told friends about this, in a room called Grand Central, second floor of the Kaisai Lodge there in Chapel Hill. And, to their credit, when I told them about this idea that I had, they encouraged me. They didn't say, you can't do that. What are you thinking? How are you going to do that? Pat Cartmel, who's still a friend of mine to this day, said, well, I went to Culver Academy, and we used to go to this place called the Second City to go to comedy shows on field trip. You should look into them. I said, all right, what's that? And I had seen SCTV, the show, but didn't connect that with Second City. So I used the Google of the time, 411, and I called Chicago, and then I called Second City, and found out about writing classes being taught by Michael McCarthy, who was a former SNL writer. And so November of 1990, I flew to Chicago with a bag of clothes and a computer driven by a fraternity brother, Chris Chapman, and Ian Taylor, to go start studying sketch comedy writing at the Second City.
And is that initially, again, what got you this jump into improv? Because I know it's been a huge part of your life.
Yeah, but I would say, I was doing it all along at the lodge.
Sure.
They were very funny guys. We were always doing bits. We were always improvising. Oh, yeah. And these guys could play. Like, they could improvise. And we didn't know really what it was. Doing characters or voices or imitating each other or doing scenarios. And I was already at the lodge because there was something called Coffee House, which for us was our variety show, talent show that we did once a semester. And my last year there, in the fall of '89 and spring of '90, I hosted it with a fraternity brother, Chuck Brown. And that was kind of like a mini SNL kind of feeling. We were writing jokes, we were doing Weekend Update, we were videotaping sketches. And so to their credit, they encouraged me to do it. And so when I went to Chicago and I started studying sketch comedy writing, I found out about the Improv Olympic and Del Close and the improvisation, and I realized this was a thing, and I ended up started studying improv with Sharna Halpern and Del Close at the Improv Olympic, and then got hired by Second City.
And you were also a founder of the Upright Citizens Brigade, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, in '91, groups of us wanted to do more than just improvisation. We wanted to start writing sketch comedy. So Matt Besser, Adam McKay, Horatio Sands, Drew Franklin, and myself, I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, we started doing sketch comedy and improvisation at a place called Kill the Poets, and that became the original Upright Citizens Brigade, UCB. So yeah, around '91 we started doing stuff.
How did you start to, I don't want to say draw attention, because obviously that's not what you were in it for. It wasn't a matter of who was watching you. You were doing what you loved. You were doing what you had done since the lodge. I mean, writing out jokes, filming sketches, that all seems not odd today, but definitely unorthodox, not something that you think someone typically does, especially with social media. Now it's you film a 4-second video, you go viral. Obviously, it doesn't really speak to what comedy truly is. Where did you really start to find traction and a stride when you got into all of this?
Well, I think it's it's one of those things where there's a lot of plateaus. But I got to Chicago November 1st, 1990, and by August of '99, I was sitting in the SNL 25th anniversary audience as a writer. So it took 9 years. I did take some time off in between where I didn't do anything for a year and change. But it was just, it's the tipping point. It's just drop, 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 drop. And then at some point, luck and hard work meet opportunity. And they came to the Second City in '98, I think it was, or '99. Yeah, they came in '99 to scout talent. And then that's how I got an audition on 8H to audition for SNL, and ultimately got hired as a writer in '99.
Excellent. And you mentioned hard work. Again, while it's meshed and mixed with many other factors and things that got you to where you are today, what do you define as hard work?
Well, I think it's different for every craft. The hard work, a carpenter may put in is different than the hard work someone who is in academia might put in. For us, our hard work was doing as many shows as we could. So getting as much stage time as you can, getting as many rehearsals as you can. I was studying both improvisation and acting at a place called the Center Theater with Mary Ann Thebus. And so, the hard work came from taking classes, studying lines, rehearsing, putting up scenes, practicing, doing all those things that, give you kind of invisible combat stripes once you get in front of a live audience. So I think hard work depends on what you do. It's different for an MMA fighter than it is for someone who's a stage performer.
Sure. And going off stage performers, obviously you mentioned that you wrote for the '99-2000 season, correct? And I can't imagine the amount of people you got to work with or encounter, write for on a day-to-day basis. Who were some people you really connected with, whether it was fellow writers like yourself or people that were actually performing on SNL?
Well, one thing at SNL that people don't tell you is, as a new writer, you're only asked or allowed to submit one new sketch a week. So your name can only appear first in a sketch once. You could appear in other places second or third, according to whose idea it was. But so there's not a lot of pressure put on you in terms of you write one sketch a week. They tell you, look, we don't expect you to if you get one sketch on all year, we'll be happy. Just, it takes some time to learn the place. But, the people I enjoyed working with, Horatio and Will, and Tracy Morgan. And, it was a great cast at the time. And, I felt lucky just to be in that environment and to have gotten like the 25th anniversary season. You basically get the prom before senior year starts.
Of course. And again, I have no intention of attempting to leaven you or anything like that, but Tina Fey has said many times that she credits a lot of her comedic success, or perhaps you as a catalyst for her. Tell me about working in that realm and just writing jokes, not just, because again, not everyone's going to be Tina Fey that you encounter, and you're not always going to be working with someone who will make it really big, but SNL, it's a big stage. Tell me just like what it's like to actually get to write, because eventually you do have sketches used. Is that right?
Yeah, it's writing. Writing, especially sketch comedy, you're coming up with a premise, and a premise is everything. A premise, to some degree, is the wood that you would make fine furniture with, and the furniture is only going to be as good as the wood you start with. So it's a matter of just any idea you get, putting it in your premise file. So, at that time, a premise file was something that you may have kept, on a pad or a notebook or a journal. If you were lucky to have a computer, you might create a file on your computer called premises, and then you'd have dash idea. And the people at the show probably had 30 and 40 pages of premise files. So when it was time to write for a host, it wasn't a matter of like, what am I going to write for Danny DeVito? You maybe look at your premise file and you may think, well, here's something that he might be good in, of a premise that I had. And, it's just resigning yourself to a minimum of 3 drafts: the down draft, the up draft, then the dental draft where you're checking every tooth. But, writing is, taking this idea that you had and ripping it from the ether, and it's all compensating for us. Doesn't feel like the way I wanted to. It sounds weird. It's awkward. You keep doing it. And as, Lauren and the people at the show say, they don't do it because it's ready. They do it because it's Saturday at 11:30.
Sure. And to an extent, it's obviously a very challenging feat at times. And I think even a man of your stature and your practice would admit that there are times where it's very difficult to write. And you mentioned there are certain people that you feel like would fit better in certain things. So would you say that there are certain sketches that you've written that cater to certain people over others, not in terms of preferring them, as in it just would be probably better delivered by those people?
Well, I always try to write what makes me laugh.
Okay.
What I think is funny, what I'd like to see on TV, where, and trying, with Second City is one of my backgrounds. Essentially we focused on social and political satire. So everything was either socially funny or politically funny. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it could be both. But ultimately, I think a writer has to kind of write what they want to see, especially a comedy writer, what they want to see on TV, on stage, and in film.
You've written many skits. Is there one that strikes you as a favorite? And it doesn't not. You said you write for what makes you laugh, so that's important to note. Is there a favorite of yours personally that you've written over the years?
Well, one sketch that I, was interesting to write was with my friend Horatio Sands, because it was a sketch that was the monologue for Dylan McDermott. And when we were younger, Horatio played an orderly in Miracle on 34th Street that Dylan McDermott was in. And then now Dylan McDermott was hosting this show, so we wrote a monologue about how Dylan McDermott had put the kibosh on Horatio's career, and now he was meeting up with him at SNL. It's kind of complicated, but when you see the clip of Horatio and Dylan McDermott in 34th Street, and then you see that they've reconnected here, it was just a lot of cool little things that came together that made it kind of fun and funny for us to do.
Now, you are removed from it now, but SNL has been around for a long, long time. Ideally, when you think about TV shows, even ones that are built on this kind of premise, they don't last forever. No dynasty really ever is able to last that long. And I think conceding that is just part of it. Why do you think SNL's been able to stay afloat for so long and do particularly well?
Well, I think they've got, a great formula. People love sketch comedy. It's comfort food. It's on Saturdays at 11:30, So it works. There's always going to be talented people around the country who want to be sketch comedians. So it's constantly going to have people who are going to learn from other people and then be able to come and do this. And I think I don't see any reason why it couldn't continue on indefinitely, because it's, the way the show works, it's kind of been the same for the 4+ decades it's been on. And there is that formula there. It's like, a sporting game or an athlete, you're not going to, you only have to hit 1 out of 3 to get in the Hall of Fame in baseball. So with SNL, maybe not every sketch is to people's liking, but there'll always be something in a show that, hopefully makes people laugh and maybe think.
Who were some of the guest hosts you guys rotated in during that season that you were involved?
Well, I guess my first host was Jerry Seinfeld. He was great because he came and he sat with us in the writer's room, and he was doing bits with us and, throwing out rewrites and ideas. Danny DeVito was great. It was fun working with him. He, very down-to-earth, grounded guy that wanted to make, people laugh. Norm Macdonald was one of our hosts. I remember seeing Cowbell tried with Norm Macdonald, and it didn't get on. It went to dress rehearsal. It didn't make it to air, and then they tried it with Chris Walken, and it did work. Jennifer Aniston, I think, was one of our hosts. She was great. Very funny, very nice person. And plus, by the time I got to the show, it was a time where, everyone was on their best behavior.
Sure.
But luckily, all the hosts I had were, nice people, and, all I would have is good gossip to say about them.
I guess, again, this is a little off topic. I guess Jennifer Aniston was at the 6th, 7th season of Friends at that time?
Yeah, she'd been on for a while. Yeah.
It was 94 to 04?
Yeah.
I would have been so starstruck. Again, I know that's off topic. I just try to imagine myself in your shoes there. Yeah. But of course, you were just doing what you always had done, writing, trying to make content. I mean, it makes sense. And I feel like a lot of times we forget that those people are people just like us, and that it's not really any different. We've covered bits and pieces of the process, not just with writing, but the show process itself. Could you give some insight into what a preparation week looks like until reaching that Saturday night
at SNL? Yeah, I mean, you come in on Monday, and sometime in the mid-afternoon to early evening, the host shows up. And then when the host shows up, they go to a room with whoever's with them, and then you can go into the room and you can say, hey, nice to meet you, my name is Ali, and here's some of my ideas, see what you think, because then you have the first meeting Monday afternoon or Monday early evening in Lorne's office, where everybody comes in, all the actors, all the writers, and the host is there, and you pitch a couple of your sketch ideas, right? So you just go around the room, and Lorne will go, Ali, and then you will pitch one or two ideas. And then after that, you really don't have another deadline until Wednesday at 10 a.m. when your sketch is due. And as I said, as a new writer, you're only allowed to submit one sketch a week.
Sure.
And then after the Wednesday 10 a.m. deadline, you have the read-through of all the sketches. Could be 40 to 50 sketches, where you meet on the 17th floor, and all the actors are around a table with the host and Lorne and a few producers, and then the rest of us are just around the room, hair and makeup, wardrobe, set design, writers, and you read through the 40 to 50 sketches.
Sure.
And then after that, everybody goes in, not everybody, the host and Lorne and the producers and head writers go into Lorne's office. They pick 12 sketches, and those go up on note cards outside the office, so you can write there, see if your sketch was picked or if it wasn't. If it wasn't picked, then you don't have anything on that week. If it was picked, then you go to hair and makeup, wardrobe, set design. You start talking to them about what you have, your vision of the living room, your vision of what the people will be wearing, what their hair might be like. Then once that's done, Wednesday night is usually when everybody went out for a drink. It was the kind of the break point of the week. And then Thursday at 1 p.m. was the rewrite table, where they divided the writing staff in half. Half went to the 17th floor, half went to the 9th floor. The head writers run the table, which means they sit at the head of the table, and they go through 6 sketches in each of the 2 rewrite rooms. And each sketch gets about 45 minutes to an hour of just, talking about it, trying to punch it up, trying to make it funnier, dealing with standards and practices at NBC that may have had an issue with something you were saying or doing. The actors sometimes come in to read their stuff, but sometimes they don't, because they're on the stage blocking with the directors, and they're moving the sets around. But by the time you show up Thursday, it's amazing how much they've done in terms of set building and preparation. And then Thursday and Friday is more rehearsing, blocking, rewriting. Saturday is more kind of rehearsing and blocking. There's a 12 o'clock run through. There's like a dinner at 5 for everybody who wants to go to the NBC commissary. And then at 8 o'clock, they run the whole 12 sketches. And that's why that dress rehearsal is 2 hours long. And I tell people that's a good time to see the show too, because when you're watching it, you can't really tell that's not the live show that they do at 11:30. You get to see another half hour of sketches. And, from there, there's a meeting in Lorne's office between dress and air, where the 12 sketches become 8 roughly. The running order may change. There may be notes in terms of how to punch it up or take things out or add things in. Then that half hour between dress and air, the dress and air rehearsal, you're working on it. And then at 11:30, you do the show from 11:30 to 1, and then, pre-COVID, I guess, go out for the after party.
Of course. Now, obviously, you have been in several realms within, comedy, sketch writing, all of that. It's not just, make no mistake, it's not solely constrained to SNL. Tell me about what came a little bit after, what you started to fall into after your time with SNL.
Well, one of the things, we purport, I have a comedy theater called the People's Improv Theater, the Pit, which the name came from the Pit in Chapel Hill, an area where everybody gathers and people walk through. And one of the things in our theater we used to say is craft, community, career. Work on your craft and your career will come. Work on your community and your career will come. But just work on a career and you'll have neither craft nor community. So, the people I had been working with in the community, the people, the craft is the stage time, both on a stage in front of an audience or in front of a camera, led to other gigs coming up, right? Other people inviting me to, be in a show they were doing or casting me in something. And then after SNL ended, I was kind of like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to LA, maybe go to Paris for a year or something? And then 9/11 happened. And after that, there was a sense, and I was around 33, I guess, at the time, of what can I do to help New York? I didn't feel like I wanted to leave at that point. And in September 24th of 2002, almost a year after 9/11, we opened up the People's Improv Theater and started that.
Sure. And you continued with that up until this point?
Yes. However, we had 6 businesses pre-COVID. Now we have 2. We surrendered our large 10,000 square foot space. We surrendered our Chapel Hill space. We're now with our original 2,500 square foot black box theater, and we have a bar called Pioneers.
Do you have any plans, barring any type of additional pandemics or national worldly disasters, do you have any plans for any type of expansion or maybe community outreach?
Yeah, we were growing, which is why we went to Chapel Hill. We were looking at other cities to try to see if the Pit would work there. We do a lot of corporate stuff, a lot of team building workshops, a lot of bonding workshops, listening workshops. We just did one last week for Ryan Serhant of $1 Million Listing. And, so that's a way where we want to help folks hopefully practice the arts of improvisation in a more corporate or business environment. But we'll see. I think, we're still a ways away from seeing what's going to happen with the virus and how things settle down.
Sure. And again, just hopefully we see that we only trend upwards. It's very infrequent in life that we always do. But it has been inspiring to see kind of the resilience that people have been showing. And I think we forget as humans how much we actually have. And I do think the adjustments have been great. As far as getting involved goes, it's great to hear that you have something that's truly active and that you're truly making strides in places. Back home, in Louisville, most of our improv organizations, actors, theater, anyone doing anything involving theater, comedy, it's shut down right now, and that's tough to hear. It's such like an integral part of our world, even if people think it might be like silly or goofy. Like it's not. Every Christmas I'd go with my parents to see the same play every single year, and a lot of other families do the same thing. We'd go to shows all the time to see. Not even just joke shows. We'd go to shows all the time just to be entertained, or musicals. Just the theater, the stage. Any type of performing arts just needs to be invested in, and hopefully COVID doesn't prolong any type of issues that we're seeing now, and hopefully we're on the back end of it. Hello, brothers. We decided to include some additional audio from a break conversation that we had with Ali. Hope you guys enjoy.
As a writer, sorry, this is my last question.
All right, you go for it.
Like, was it weird? I'm assuming that some of your skits made it on, like you have, yeah. So, was it weird having other people maybe not get the credit for the skit, but get like the recognition for the skit, knowing that you were the one that wrote it?
Well, I auditioned as a performer.
Yeah.
But they weren't looking for a male performer that year. They were looking for one female performer. And they weren't even looking for writers. So they were kind enough to give me a job as a writer.
Yeah.
And with anything, sure, would I rather been the person in the sketch that I created at Second City? Sure, but it wasn't my time.
Yeah.
You did obviously end up thoroughly enjoying what you got to do, and that just I always like to think like, I'm not like a no regrets mentality person, but I do like to, like, it's always important to appreciate where you got, why.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it seems like you do that. And again, you credit a lot of that to the lodge, which I think is just
Well,
awesome.
I mean, all of it. But I mean, again, I don't believe in free will.
Of course.
Right? So it's like the fact, I mean, I'm 7,500 generations from the Iran area, right? One generation, my father, myself, and my mother came here in 69 at a time where SNL was happening, that a kid would watch it, that a kid would have that kind of access to playing outdoors and playing make-believe. And then I was from North Carolina, right? So all of these things that are just like, sure, it's coincidence, sure, but I mean, you know, it's just a matter of really keep showing up, right? Like the lodge, I didn't get in the first time because the first time I rushed, the fraternity brothers who weren't there that summer were like, how come this guy, he seems like he's already in here, and all these other cool brothers know him really well. It only takes 3 people to keep you out.
Yeah.
And so that spring of 87, another friend of mine, Dave Samuels, who had come there when he was a college senior, he randomly, coincidentally, although I don't believe in coincidences, got placed in my dorm as a freshman visiting Carolina. So Dave Samuels and I became friends. Then he decided to rush in spring of 87, and I was in the Avery dorm where he was living, and he said, come on, man, let's go to dinner. I was like, come on, man. And so I went back. And that second time I went back, I got in. And then later I learned that Lombardi had 4 rules he coached by: hard work, second effort, loyalty, and love. So the second effort is a lot of times where people don't put in that second effort.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Wow.
I do want to give a little disclaimer. I clicked record when we started.
That's fine.
Can we use that?
Of course, of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
Because me and him had to like plan on doing like kind of
No
like
worries.
Wolvers thing.
That's fine. But one of the things I also say, as an actor, one of the things we say in the world of acting is roles you're right for, you cannot escape. Ones you're not right for, you'll never get, right? So same thing I feel with property, right? There was no escaping me being in a lodge. The path was pulling me that way, right? I just had to keep showing up.
Would you classify that as destiny? Maybe something else?
Yeah, sure. Destiny.
Because everyone has a
Absolutely.
different term for it. You know, again, I'm a man of faith myself, and what I would call it is like a plan, like something that's been predestined, as in like my actions are all already known, that kind of thing. Free will, it gets really deep and complicated, but I know just like I definitely think a lot of people will use the term like destiny, like this is where I'm supposed to be, and I think that's really cool. So, Mason, you good for us to get back into it? Great. Okay, so last thing we left off on was I was talking about how I was disappointed that COVID had affected the Louisville theater. Okay, yeah, and then I'll move on from that. So you've discussed just your career, obviously a very long, fruitful career, still going on, well into your later adult years, and you've still maintained the same enjoyment, passion for it. And it seems like, based on our conversation earlier, you contribute so much of that to just where you started in the lodge, where it seemed like so simple, where it just seemed like from an outside eye, guys cracking jokes and writing things, recording, and that kind of thing. Did you ever think, like, obviously you're a man that doesn't believe in free will, but did you ever think you would get where you are?
No, I mean, because, you know, it never crossed my mind until that Christmas Eve of '89 that SNL was even an option. Like, I never thought that. But I guess, again, because of high school English with Mrs. Stoltz, reading James Joyce, Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, because of that book, you have the idea of epiphany. And so once you have the idea of an epiphany, then you're like open to epiphanies. And so watching that show that evening and being, you know, a 5th-year senior and didn't quite know what I was going to do, that kind of pushed that epiphany up to the surface of, I want to write for SNL. And then going back to the lodge and telling fraternity brothers like Alex Young, Pat Cartmel, Ian Taylor, Peter O'Hara, Andy Basil, who were, you know, around, Scott Sanders, Clinton Wilburn, they encouraged me, you know, and like I said, there were a lot of funny guys who both liked to laugh and liked to do bits and crack jokes and do characters. And, you know, I was pretty good at impersonating other people in the fraternity, and I didn't know it at the time, but being able to impersonate somebody and then speak as them is kind of, you know, one of the tools of a sketch comedian. So, yeah, I mean, if it weren't for the lodge, I don't know if I would have, that would have been my path. But again, it's it's all intertwined,
Of course.
you know?
Lastly, we always finish with a useless UFE question. If you were a fruit, what fruit would you be?
Wow, it's tough. I love pineapples, but banana is a solid fruit you can live off. Does that count as a fruit? As banana's a fruit, right?
Banana's absolutely a fruit.
I mean, you know, God, I love pineapples, but bananas, I mean, you could kind of survive off a banana. You could probably survive off a pineapple too. But I love watermelon. Oh, God, there's so many good fruits out there. I don't know, man. I mean, this is tough because...
Toughest question of the interview.
Geez Louise.
What fruit do you want to be?
I got to be one fruit, but I mean, okay, I love watermelon, I love pineapples, love bananas. Mango is a good ripe mango at the right time, cut in the right way. I'm going to say watermelon.
Watermelon, we're going to go with watermelon?
Yeah, because that you could turn into a liquid. I think you can survive off watermelon. But if I had to survive off one food group, it'd probably be sweet potatoes. But if I was a mono farmer, if I only farmed one thing, it would probably be tomatoes, you know, which is a fruit.
People forget that. But you heard it here. Ali, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, man.
This has been Ali Farahnakian. I really do appreciate you sitting down with us. And I'm really much looking forward to your speech tonight. This has been another episode of The Gentleman's Journey. We do appreciate you guys listening, tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your week. God bless.